Hey guys, VaulSC here, how you going? In this video, I'm going to be running you through a single army list for every single playable faction in infiNity. We're talking the vanilla factions, the sectorials, the entire lot. The reason why I've done this is because sometimes when a new player is starting a system like infiNity, you're just getting into it, you're first of all wondering, well, what models should I buy for my army to play against my friends, play in tournaments and things like that. You don't want to be under that feeling like, oh, I kind of like the look of that model, but I also don't like the idea of it just sitting on my shelf, not being played very often. As soon as I find out that this other stuff is better. Also, when you come to building army lists, Army 6 can be a little bit daunting initially, and when you go on the forums to check out other people's army lists, it's quite hard to tell whether you're looking at a post from a player who just has no idea what they're doing and just writes bad lists all the time, or whether you're actually looking at somebody who's doing really well with the game, understands it very well. And then when newer players come to look at tournament lists and lists that people are posting for bat reps, quite often the army lists are very specialized. They're designed for a particular meta or a particular set of missions. And it can be hard as a new player to determine, well, what's a generic all-comers list look like for the faction that I want to play? How do I know what stuff to put in there to start off with that I can add to later? So what I've done is I've opened up Army 6 and I've basically created a list which I feel is decent for a new player to start with for every single faction and sectorial. If you have a look at the video description, there'll be a link to a Google Drive folder where there'll be a text document which you can open. And if you wanted to skip straight to it, you can copy the army code, and I'll be talking about the list in the video, and just load it straight up into Army 6. I'm also going to try and put some timestamps in the video description as well at some point, where you can just skip to the part of the video that relates to the factions that you're interested in. Also want to give the disclaimer before we jump into the actual lists themselves that these are not the best lists for every faction. Just don't get me wrong there. I'm trying to come up with something that includes a lot of models that, will be useful, that you'll use in a lot of lists, not just in this list. And I'm trying to create lists which you could take along to an event or to a random game and not know what mission you're going to play and generally have a shot at it. I'm trying to include things in these armies where it's relatively balanced. You'll have a decent data tracker, hopefully a liaison officer in most of these lists. There'll be some specialists in there. You'll have a way of dealing with camo, a way of dealing with AROs. Most of these lists have a lot of orders in them. There's a few 10-order lists, but that's okay. We'll explain why. But yeah, just really want to encourage people who are first getting in the game. If you've got no clue where to start, or you're interested in picking up the sectorial, but you just no idea what models to buy, you could use this as a guideline if you wanted to. You don't have to, but if there's something you can learn from it and just an idea that you can get from this video, then great. So that's why I am doing this. So let's get into it now. Alrighty, we're going to just go straight through it. I've got everything opened top to bottom up there, and we'll just go right through the entire catalog, starting with Pan-Oceania. And right away, I probably should apologize that this is a bit of a abnormal looking Pan-Oceania list because it really hinges off of Joan of Arc with her inspiring leadership ability. If you're new and you're thinking of picking up Pano as your first faction, and if you do want to go with a list like this, it probably pays to go into the wiki and read up on what inspiring leadership does. There are a few things like giving courage to everybody so that you can pass guts checks automatically and stuff like that. And there's the free coordinated order you get with your lieutenant order. But the primary thing here is that it not only makes your trauma doc and your war corps into regular orders, it does that for the Monstrucker and the Helot as well. So when you're looking at the army list and you're thinking, oh, there's 4 irregular orders there, well, actually there are 10 because the irregular orders all count as regular orders. So yeah, it can be, how do I say this? I think people starting Pano would probably want to play a bit more of a Pano themed list in the sense that it includes a lot of quintessential Pano models, or just go straight for something big like a Jotun or the Knights or whatever. But if you're really wanting to get into Pano and play something that's going to be quite competitive right off the bat, I suggest this one just because it's got all the really good elements in there. You've got plenty of orders to work with. Joan's a really good data tracker. She really is a good linchpin holding it together. Fast attack, you've got the bulletier there. And this HMG is going to clear any arrows. You've got the TR bot there as well. Even the secondary NIS for the multi-sniper. There's a forward observer in hidden deployment even. You've got your doctor there. Zulu Cobra, an extremely powerful Pano piece. So I like this list just because it includes a lot of really good elements that are very strong in the meta at the moment. Again, if you're playing this game for the feel of it and for the theme and for the models, maybe you'd rather not have like the Helot in there or the Monstruck or the Walker or the Tech B. You can take them out and put in other things like your Quila Guard or a Tag or whatever seems cool to you. But those decisions will weaken the list. Like, this is a very, very strong Pano list at the moment, I feel. Moving on, next is Shock Army of Acontecimento. Now, there are a few different ways to approach this sectorial that are equally strong. Most of the variations that I think that are powerful will include the regular core link with one or two Bagmari attached to them, at least one or two Nagas, and quite a lot of the cheerleader bots in there. So that's what I'm providing here with this. Darts in there as well. I think you can afford the extra Kyle and Dart and the two Nagas if you're not going with a tag. If you're going to have the Tikbalang in there, then you've got to make some sacrifices. So I've decided to play this without the tag. I do want to point out that the Bagmari with HMG is allowed to join the team. So if you want to have the 3 regulars plus the 2 Bagmaris, you can, but I've got that 4th regular there as well. Reason being that maybe you lose a member, your multi-sniper gets shot, you can reform the link with 5. But the other reason why is that the HMG can equally well go off on its own and leave the rest of them with the Bagmari multi-sniper in defense. The thing you've got to be careful about if you're new to this game and you're playing with the Bagmari HMG option is that there's a very big difference in terms of what he can bite off and chew in terms of killing opposing models, depending on whether he's in the link team or not. So if you're just clearing random flash pulse bots and warcores, single guy with the HMG walking around will do that very, very effectively. But if you're trying to crack a heavy infantry missile launcher on a link team, it's quite dangerous to just go after it with this one Bagmari. But if you have him in the link, then the odds, start to look much better in your favor. There's also the option of putting the Orc Trooper in there. Again, the Orc Trooper is quite expensive, but very potent. Think of it this way, because the Bagmari has MSV1 and Mimetism, quite often the face-to-face rolls start to come, pretty close to what you'd need with the Orc anyway, and you do it a bit more cheaply, which is why I haven't included him. But he's a very tough ARO, so if you like the look of the Orc going in there, or if you've got an Orc with one of the starter sets from Pano that you bought maybe from Varuna or the Ice Storm set and you want to use them, then probably take out the Bagmari HMG and put the Orc in there instead and drop maybe one of the Nagas or something like that, or Dart, to be able to afford that. But in general, this has got a lot of different options. You've got the fast attack in terms of the Akal, plenty of midfield objective completion stuff, specialists to do that, tons of orders, very defensive, especially with all of the mines being laid around, mine layer ability. Note that I've chosen an Evo bot. And the reason why is that the regular is quite awkwardly priced with the hacking profile having to include a light grenade launcher and a fast panda, so you're paying a bit more than usual for it. So with the Evo repeater, I find that you're getting the job down. You can have the assisted jump there for the Carl Commando, but also an Evo hacking device allows you to re-roll a hacking attempt. So if there's a lot of clutch stuff happening in the midfield with your assault hacker, there's the chance to re-roll that. Let's say you're going after a tag that's set up in the midfield, you're going to try and possess it, it whiffs the reset check and you whiff your rolls as well. That might be worth a re-roll from the Evo repeater. So read up a bit more on Evo rules if you want to know more. Of course, the other thing as well is that I thought about when I added the Evo is that you've got so many of these repeater bots, the Fugazis and the Pathfinder and all of that. So 3 Fugazis, 1 Pathfinder. You can spend that command token to have them all burst to an ARO if you're expecting a very powerful Alpha Strike coming your way. So that could be quite a fun thing as well, and another reason why I've gone with the Evo. So that's a bit of a look at Shock Army. Military orders, I had a really tough time making this one. This is a 10 order list. I thought about showing you guys a list that had sort of 14, 15 orders with a lot of cheaper troops spread around, but I don't feel like that's, you know, something that military orders does really, really well. The other option is to go Joan of Arc again and have that Crusade Link team, but there are some problems with that. You're a bit too committed to moving out in the midfield and running out of orders. The Order Sergeant with Father Knights and maybe a tag like a Seraph is one that I really like as well. But I've chosen this one because I think if you're new to military orders, you should try and really get your teeth into the Santiago Knights and Magisters as soon as possible. You don't have to do it the way that I've done it and compress it all into a 10-man list. You can drop the Order Sergeants if you want to and have cheaper things in there to get out to like 13, 14 orders if you want to. But the thing I like about this is that if you're going first, you can charge the Knights up the field and just attack, just go all in. Or if you really wanted to be crazy, you could try and infiltrate the Spec Sergeants onto their side of the table, and if they fail their checks, well, you can send the Link team in, but you've got 3 of them to attempt that with, and as long as one of them makes it over there, you can attack straight away with it. Or you can just play a cagey game. If you're going second, then all of these TO camo troopers can hang out in hidden deployment. You've got your missile launchers and Panzerfausts. It's a very defensive list if you look at it that way. And you know, in terms of specialists, they're all there. The Knights of Santiago, very powerful, not just at shooting, but the hacker as well, with the deflector makes them very competent. So I think you'll find this list kind of robust as a starting point, but yeah, military orders players will generally want to branch out in different directions after getting the hang of this kind of setup. Next, NCA. So first thing I'll draw your attention to is that buried into Group 2 there's actually a Swiss Guard missile launcher, and once you see that in there, it kind of characterizes the list very heavily. The Swiss Guard missile launcher is such a powerful ARO piece. He's so hard to kill even once he's revealed, even if they have smoke grenades, MSV2 troopers, because he's sitting there in cover with, what is it, armor 5. And even if he's firing back against ODD or into through smoke, he's Ballistic Skill 15, so the chance of landing that devastating hit is huge. And the light shotgun as well for close range stuff to protect him. Even in a pinch, he might be able to move out later in the game into clutch situations into the middle of the table and actually do some work with it. So in combination with the Fusiliers, that's very strong. Also, your opponent won't really fully know whether you're running a Hexa sniper or a Swiss Guard HMG. The Garuda's off the table and the Hexa is as well, so they're going to have trouble counting up your points. With the Fusilier Link team, one thing here is that the CSU counts as a Fusilier nowadays, so you can deploy your missile launcher watching the table if you want to. If they just kill it because they attack it with, you know, an ODD Trooper, Achilles, or whatever it may be, and kill it, you can reform the Link with the CSU and move out with that HMG and do some damage later on. You've got all the tech and the specialists in this list. The only thing this list is really lacking is in the midfield infiltrating presence of specialists and button presses. Really the only way to go there is to go with a Locust, but I don't particularly like the Locusts because they're not in marker state, and if you're going second and you deploy them that far out, they're quite easy pickings for enemy infiltrators that do have camo state. So what you're wanting to do is really just gain control of the table, get the long range shooting done, and then just push out there with your Pathfinder or CSU or Hexa Killer Hacker, whatever you've got left to go and complete the mission with. If you're starting first, what you can do is move out with a Bulletier, very powerful attack piece as always. Unfortunately, the hacker's in the same group, so by the time they remove 2 orders with a command token, and then you've put up the support way, you've got 7 orders left. What you might even like to do is spend 6 orders moving out, just picking off the low-hanging fruit, getting the easy kills, leaving it out there, and then the Garuda can come on, and the Garuda could actually use the repeater of the Bulletier. So with your last order from Group 1, the Fusilier uses that to shift the assisted fire over to the Garuda, which you know, can be a fancy move, but only if you've pre-planned that turn and know what you're doing. Otherwise, it's good to just take the kills you can get, move the Bulletier back, and get on with the game. Or even if you're really clever, move the Bulletier back to a position of total cover, knowing that they'll actually come after it, and plan your Swiss Guards shot once they come towards the Bulletier to surprise them. But generally, a pretty strong NCA list, good starting point. Varuna, very, very powerful sectorial. I thought about showing you guys just a version with the cutter and the Fusilier Link team in a 10 order list. I feel like if I'm giving a good list for a new player to start with, I think you can be a bit too pigeonholed into playing infiNity just one particular way if you're running a list like that right off the bat. With this kind of list here, you've got a very strong defense, but you've got a few good attacking pieces like the Bulleteer, the Echo Bravo as well, and obviously the Zulu Cobras are good at moving out at any point. The Kamau multi-sniper, which is extremely, extremely feared and powerful in the reactive turn, is joined by the Kamau HMG, which will help if you actually want to push out with the Fusiliers and attack things. So really just a top tier kind of sectorial and top kind of list. You can take 3 Sensor Zulu Cobras and you can take 3 Helots, but I decided it's better just to dial that back a bit and just take 2 of each, because you don't really need much more than that, given that you've got so much heavy defense as it is. And by dropping those guys, you can afford to take things like the Crocman or the Echo Bravo, or things that give you a different angle to attack from and get work done from. So what we're left with is just a kind of a varied, robust list with a bit of diversity in it that will reward a lot of different ways of playing. Again, I mean, there's so many different ways to play infiNity. You could go with Patsy and the Orc and the Engineer Harris, and I've seen that used a fair bit. But this is a list that I'd be scared of coming up against. I think in the hands of a competent player, you do well with it. And even if you're a new player, you start to learn pretty quickly about what to do with this stuff, right? Now we're on to Yuqing. So vanilla Yuqing, I've played this faction probably more than any other faction over the last 4 or 5 years. A lot of staple stuff in there, like the Celestial Guards, Guangxi, Order Battery there, plenty of orders to use. You may notice that I've got Li Gong in there, and funnily enough, I added him in last. I put in everything else in the list because everything else seemed like a no-brainer to include, and I happen to have exactly 32 points left, and I thought, well, if you're a new player and you've done what I've done with 2 Zanchis back here, Lieutenant and a Lieutenant Decoy, it's even less likely that they'll kill your Lieutenant, given that you've got Chain of Command in there as well. Although if you want to, having the Chain of Command plus the Cien can be good, because the Cien could then be the Lieutenant, but both of these are attacking pieces and you wouldn't want to lose both of them. But with 2 Zanchis sitting back there and them not necessarily picking the right one to assassinate, then finding you've got Chain of Command as well can be quite forgiving. But not only that, Li Gong gives you a few different tools that the rest of the list doesn't really have. He's actually a specialist, willpower 14 out in the midfield, as if the Guilang and the Ninja weren't enough. I mean, if you're playing a mission like I don't know, unmasking or supplies, and you need 1 specialist per thing out in the middle of the field, it may be good to spread the specialists out, the fast-moving ones, that is. The SMG with Albedo, MSV1, is going to find some interesting targets out in the midfield, if not near to their deployment zone, if you want to just rush them over there, which is definitely doable. But yeah, I mean, 32 points, you get a 2-wound model for that, effectively, with the NWI bioimmunity combination. He's pretty good. Elsewhere, we see some stuff which is pretty staple. We've got the Doctor to help out Major Luna. Major doesn't have to reveal herself until she's ready to ARO because of her camouflage. And the Marksmanship level X, it can be really potent sometimes. If you're playing on a table with a saturation zone, having that single bullet sniper to attack back with can be really good. Shaolin Monks, obviously, and the Celestial Guard able to provide plenty of smoke for the Cien Warrior to take advantage of, so you don't really need a Ruishi. And because there's no Ruishi, there's no regular hacker, so your Ninja Killer Hacker is what's allowing you to take the remotes. Guilang and Ninja combo is tried and tested, and a really good way of playing Yuqing. You've got the Guilang, who's going to be using most of Group 2's orders to move out and put down mines. The Liberto can do that, but he loses his... he's only got limited camouflage, can't go back into camouflage state, whereas the Guilang can do that. Note that if the Ninja's on one side, the Guilang's on the other, the Guilang can put out the deployable repeater, the Ninja can use that for killer hacking, or if there's a target the Guilang doesn't want to go into close combat with, the Ninja can do that. So generally you've got 2 different guys with different roles and different abilities, and you can deploy them based on where they need to be. I find in games where I took 2 Guilangs, there'd occasionally be a job that needed a ninja and I don't have a ninja, whereas if I take 2 ninjas, there'd be a job which needs a Guilang and I didn't have a Guilang. Guilang can be really good at shooting certain things from the midfield thanks to surprise shot and MSV1 and the combi rifle there. So just you end up with a nice 300/6 SWC's list, which is pretty robust, plenty of orders, and it's got the tools for just about everything really. You can get rid of Li Gong and put in a Tiger Soldier instead if you prefer, but if you're taking that approach, then it probably is worth bringing in the Hacker again and so on and so forth. Vanilla Yu Qing can be played in a bunch of different ways, as we know. I mean, it's such a big faction. You could go with the Mo Wang plus the Dao Ying, the NCO. That's a really good way to play it. Obviously, the Hack Tao. If you're going to take the Hack Tao, then you take the Rushi, because you still need MSV2 to take advantage of all the smoke grenades. That's a great way to play this faction also. Or you can just build your list around some of the other big boys, like the Dao Fei, or the Battle Cat, the Sujian, even the what do you call it, the Yan Huo. Lots of different ways to play this faction, but here is a good starting example if you're just getting into Yu Qing. ISS. So I couldn't help myself. I've made this big 20 order list just to show off how ridiculous ISS can be with this big 20 order badassery. Note that it can be a bit difficult to stuff all of these orders into your deployment zone, and that is the one weakness here. If you are struggling with that idea, what you could do instead is take away all of the Celestial Guards, and your link team will basically be a 5-team core with just the Quangshis and one Celestial Guard control device, and then the other group of Quangshis are just going to be free roaming. In this particular list, you've got 3 options for that core link, don't you? There's the Crane plus the Celestial Guards, or there's the first group of Quangshi, or there's the second group of Quangshi. So you've got to be quite careful about how you deploy, and with Quangshi running around the table, they could be quite susceptible to a lot of AROs. But if you start to learn what you're doing, this list can actually be really relentlessly oppressive to your opponent, because you've just got so much fuel and some quite efficient models, to be honest, to attack them with. And the ability to launch smoke with those light smoke grenade launchers and link teams is really, really powerful for completing missions and things like that. And I mean, despite having the points spread across 20 models, you've still got the Ninja, still got the Sophotex, still got the Major Luna in there, still got a guy with, 5-team core backing up a Blitzskull 13, Spitfire, 2 nanopulses, that kind of thing. Amazing in close combat. So this list takes a bit of getting used to and a bit of skill, but it's very, very potent. As I said, if this is not really your thing, but you want to play ISS, then maybe try out a Xian Warrior with 2 Zanyings in a Harris team, and then you still want to take 8 Quangshi, but 4 of them are going to be grouped up in an order in a 5-team core, and they won't be impetuous. And the other ones, they're the only ones you need to be careful about, your impetuous moves. And the list might come to like 15, 16, 17 orders rather than 20, meaning that the points are sort of compressed a bit more into models which you can find hiding places for. So that might be a better way to go if you don't like this setup. But one of the joys of playing ISS is having a massive 20 order pool, but tons of quality despite that. So really, really cool. Okay, Invincible Army. I really struggled with this one because Invincible Army are a bit of a tough faction, really, to use. I immediately thought showing you guys the big Tactical Awareness Pain Train, but I think there's disappointment if you're just going to start using that and only that. What I've managed to somehow come up with here is a list which actually has 16 models in it. 15 regular orders and 1 irregular. And it still has a bit of clout, and I've achieved that by not really throwing lots of heavy infantry in there. So sadly, even though Invincible Army is the faction of lots of heavy infantry, I'm not actually doing that here. We're instead going for the Zhanshi core with the Haidao multi-sniper, pretty solid. HMG in there as well for when you do need to move out and bash things. Then there's the Evo repeater, which is able to help the Lu Xing as it's landing, and also does take advantage of again the command token you can spend for its abilities. Other than that, just trying to get as many cheerleaders as possible in there. Zensha, because I think people will appreciate having a liaison officer and something which can actually press buttons midfield. I know it seems weird to have a hacking device on the Lu Xing. I've done that because it makes him a specialist, and usually you're not going to be landing nearby to enemy hackers anyway because, you know, you're hackable regardless. He's basically a hackable heavy infantry that lands. If they only have one hacker and it's something you're landing next to, well, they have to basically do hack transport or... you know, or they forfeit their arrow apparently, so you're not going to get hit by a brain blast as you come down. And even with brain blast, I mean, you can sustain 2 wounds anyway, and then he can start shooting them. So I think you'll be surprised by this guy. He's actually not a bad choice unless you're really going up against a faction full of killer hackers. Rushi in there as well, despite no smoke hanging around. The Evo can put assisted fire on it, and it can be quite good for moving out and attacking. And again, this is in spite of having a hideout multi-spectral visor level 2 already in the list. I think that he's more defensive. It's harder to move out and pick things off with him. The Rushi's better at doing that for just rushing forward. Again, a bit of a tricky list to play and a difficult faction to build lists for. But if you're a bit stumped with Invincible Army and you want to try something out right off the bat, this could be a good way to go. Otherwise, ignore my advice and just take all your heavy infantry you can and make a 10 order list. That's the other way to do it. Okay, Ariadna time. So again, this is what, 19 models you're having to put down on the table, but the difference between this and the Imperial Service list we looked at is that most of this stuff actually infiltrates. So deploying this army on the table is a lot easier than it looks. Let's go through it. The Grunt is going to be trying to infiltrate. The Tank Hunter, that is a camo. The Liberto is out in the midfield. Foxtrot, Chasseur, they're all out in the midfield. And Van Zant's not actually on the table. So the rest of it then goes down in your deployment zone. This list is actually kind of ball-busting. Ariadna hasn't really got a lot of direct buffs over the last couple of years, which has allowed other factions to sort of feel like they're overtaking. But coming back and looking at just what the basic vanilla Ariadna can do, it's actually really kind of scary. You've got plenty of stuff out in the midfield to complete objectives. Those Chasseurs are brilliant at that. The Foxtrot can be a really good liaison officer as well. In terms of defense, it's just so hard for them to get to grips with you. If they're trying to move over to your deployment zone and get shots off, they're going to be running into mines and all sorts. They're going to be moving past Chasseurs, which are going to just delay and then hit them with more mines or flamethrowers, so that's a real problem. In terms of what actually costs points, you've got the Tank Hunter, Spetsnaz, and Van Zant. 2 of those are in camo, and one of them's not on the table. So it's just so hard to really get to the meat of this list and remove it. Van Zant, the funny thing about him is that if there's no opportunity to bring him on straight away, as there often isn't, there's nothing wrong with holding him back for turn 2 or 3 when your opponent sort of started to forget to count things up and sort of got into the game and, you know, traded blows. There's an opening, he comes on. Van Zant can even be good just for coming on the last turn of the game and putting his 38 points in a zone which tips the scales and just wins the game without him firing even one shot. It's a bit boring, but it's extremely effective if your opponent hasn't accounted for it. So for their arrows, you're going to mostly be firing at them with the Spetsnaz, extremely good with a surprise shot and marksmanship level 2. For flushing them out of cover and going and looking for them, the Dog Warrior is very, very good at doing that. He's just a really hard beast to stop, and once he gets over there, his grenades and chain rifles really just wear away at them quite nastily. Group 1 you can even move through with just the Liberto, to be honest. Even that is just going to do enough damage. With the Grunt, sometimes you will land him on their side of the table. I think you need an 8 for that. If you don't, he's just, you know, just a regular order back on your side of the table. That's fine. But if you do land him, and if you're taking first turn, well, that's just a light shotgun or a flamethrower, which is going to cause a lot of problems, especially if they've got a lot of vulnerable, sort of fragile glass cannon type troops, which some factions do. Imagine running this guy straight into a Dakini tac bot link, who have trouble dodging, mind you, and you could either flamethrower them or fire a light shotgun. If he takes out just one of them, well, he was worth his points, but also you've gained a leg up in momentum in that game, because then your Spetsnaz can shoot, you know, their HMG or sniper, which is covering the table, or your Dog Warrior is going to have a much easier time moving in behind that Grunt and you know, moving into the hole that he's opened. Really powerful list. Caledonia. I find that Caledonia, the lists kind of write themselves, and after you've been playing Caledonia for a little while, it generally sort of just you hone in on this one sort of archetype for your list. Sure, there's other ways to play it. You can take Wolvers, you can take Mormares or whatever you want to do there, but most good Caledonia lists look a bit like this. So if you're brand new to infiNity, you know you want to play the Scots, you know you want to do well, something like this is going to be effective for you. So McMurrough, obviously very broken. Total immunity, really, really powerful for 16 with the smoke grenades and regular grenades. The heavy lifting in terms of long-range shooting is all going to come from the Highlander Grey in this Link team. You've got the Ballistical 16, AP, HMG, 5 dice, that kind of thing. There's even a paramedic in there for when the team moves out for being a specialist. I've got the Camo Marker missile launcher in there because you're going to need some arrows, but I've actually backed it up with 2 Catarans because I rate them quite highly. Note that again, like the Pano list, William Wallace does have inspiring leadership. So when you see 8 and then 2 and then 2 and then 6, what it actually means is 10 orders, regular orders in Group 1 and 8 regular orders in Group 2, which means you've got a massive list. It's pretty easy to deploy. And in terms of stopping them from coming across the table and killing you, well, you've got a camo missile launcher and 2 camo snipers to fend them off. And then when it's your turn to attack, if anything's standing up watching the table, you mow it down with the AP HMG. And if they're all hiding, then McMurrough just runs over there and just starts bombing them. So it's a pretty scary list. Oh, did I forget about Uxie McNeil? Well, if you're going first and she passes her superior infiltration roll, she's right next to them, and you're rolling up with McMurrough and with Uxia, and chances are you're going to get a lot of damage done with that. So that sort of double whammy is very powerful. When I play against Caledonia, I usually try and take first turn just to avoid having that happen to me. That's how effective that can be. So if you're looking at Caledonia, not too sure where to start buying models that work you towards something like this is my recommendation. The French. Okay, so you guys know that I'm not really a French player. I don't really understand this faction in very much depth. I do know, however, that if you really wanted to start playing the French right off the bat, like if somebody's selling a second-hand French army and you want to buy it, maybe have a look at it. A look at whether their collection has a lot of this stuff, because I find this to be quite effective. A couple of things about this faction which are good. Chasseurs are availability 4, so you may as well take them all because they are one of the best things in the faction. 2 mine layers and 2 fort observers seems to be a good spread for that. The metros are extremely cheap, but they're also quite weak at fighting, unfortunately. And one thing that would make this faction a little bit better is something which was really sort of packing a punch. I know you can take the mob lots. Don't know even if I'd bother going there. I mean, I guess what you could do is just drop in. Yeah, I mean, the special fire team says up to 3 mob lots and 2 metros. So that means you'd actually have to include 3 mob lots in there to have that punch, and that becomes a bit too, prohibitively expensive. So I've just put them there as a bit of an order battery. Yeah, I mean, the link takes you up to Ballistical 13 with the HMG. For some easier targets, that's going to be no problem. So that's what you're going to be doing there. I like Jack with the Molotov, especially late in the game where it doesn't matter if you're going to lose your lieutenant. You can move out with him and get some shots done with the Molotov. And of course, the Equipment Mirage team, doing well with the sectorial, this list, and more specifically I should say, is probably going to come down to your being able to understand how this unit works. So if you're just starting with French, I think it pays to just go very carefully through all of the special abilities that these 2 models actually have, learn exactly how they all sort of work, and then try it out, because for 71 points there for Equip Mirage, the Margot Duroc team, you're going to want to use them wisely rather than squandering them. Try and get them into a position where the light grenade launcher, the grenades are going to start bombing them quite relentlessly. I mean, she's Ballistical 14 with that light grenade launcher, and he's Physical 16 with lobbing the grenades. Once they start fighting things directly, though, they're a bit squishy. Just 1 wound on her and, 2 wounds on him. He's got total immunity, but, yeah. Once you lose one of them, the other one's going to be pretty easy to sort of home in on. They're pretty strong, though. They come as a pair, and I noticed they're not G-synced or anything like that, so at least you've got the ability to sort of send them off in different directions. That's about all I'll say for the French list. This was a bit of a throw together. So again, in French, I've kind of come out of production a little bit. They're not making more of these models as far as I'm told. But yeah, I'm not an expert on that particular one. USA, so probably a bit more to say about these guys. Unfortunately, this sectorial misses out on chasseurs, misses out on the Spetsnaz, so you've got to try and make do without some of the better things in Ariadna. What you do get access to instead is the Grunt Link team. The Grunts are very cheap, and they are decent at long range, thanks to the HMG and Sniper, and also the ability to take Rosie in there as well. What I've done here is I've taken 5 Grunts, and Rosie, and Wild Bill. And I feel like this gives you a lot of options when you're sitting down your Link Team leader marker to create a fire team core that is tailored to the mission you're playing and your opponent you're playing, the kind of matchup. So if you're planning on rushing across the other side of the table at some point, you form the team with Wild Bill in there, and he can become really powerful in that full link with his, fatality level 1, his multi-pistols, marks level 2, all of that cool stuff there. Really powerful point man. For the long range though, especially for AROs, having Rosie in there with the link backup, shock immunity plus dogged plus light rocket launcher there, she can actually be quite good at holding off an enemy attack. For the rest of the time though, if you just got the 5 grunts in the link and the snipers standing up, they have to get through the sniper first, and once they've done that, you can bring somebody else in the link team to reform it. So that's one way to get a bit of leverage out of this sectorial, doing something that you can't do elsewhere in Ariadna, while still taking some of the stuff that makes Ariadna good, like this Van Zant obviously again, Foxtrot, the Dozer with the tractor mules, very good there. Note that I've got a Blackjack in the list, which is kind of funny. I don't rate the Blackjack particularly highly, but then when I saw that it's only 36 points, a single SWC for their T2 sniper, you're not really needing the SWCs anywhere else in the list as far as I can tell. He's not bad for defending and just locking down one particular fire lane, because sitting there in cover with armor 5, he is a heavy infantry trooper, not a tag, so rather than going down the route of the Ratnik, this guy can actually go prone and just get out of harm's way if he's taking a lot of punishment. And if they do get unlucky and he snipes them with a T2 sniper and gets a crit or a hit gets through, that's pretty potent also. And then once it comes to close range, he's got the SMG chest mines in case they get the drop on him. He can defend himself that way, so he's not bad for 36 points. Maybe you guys can find some better choices in this sectorial, but if you're just starting and you like the Blackjack model and you like the rest of this can be a good place to begin with US Ariadna. Desperado for a bit of smoke there, of course, and I've got a Maverick with a Molotov, and that's another biker. The difference being, of course, the Maverick's there for moving out and actually getting the kills, like charging across the battlefield, whereas the Blackjack is more for moving out and firing smoke. Sorry, the Desperado is there for moving out and throwing smoke defensively. I have taken the one with the assault pistols, so there's that, but most of the time it's going to be the Maverick or Van Zant doing the attacking and killing out in the far field. Okay, Tartary Army Corps. This is a list which I have actually played a variation of this list. I've played a practice game with. I've used some of the things which come in the Cold Front starter set. You can see the Line Kazakh group here. So the thing I've done here is, again, I've put that redundancy in with having that one extra Line Kazakh, because you've got the veteran plus the Frontovic, and if you lose one of the Kazakhs, you can sub in the 4th one and make a 5-man core out of that. I really love the Frontovic as a data tracker, and also once you get in close range, if the APHMG isn't really going to be at the right range band, the Frontovic, Blitzskill 12, Mimetism, sometimes it's going to be better at shooting things than the Cataran is if you're in the right range anyway, and T2 with the full link backing him up can really rip things up. Dog Warrior, again, same reason as Ariadna. You want something to be able to move over there and flush them out if they're all hiding, if they don't want to get shot by your HMGs. Spetsnaz there as well. Again, that's going to be more effective than the veteran is in some situations, noting that he's got shock as well because of marksmanship level 2, so he's going to be more effective coming out of ambush camo and doing that surprise attack. But for other jobs, it's the veteran Kazakh doing most of the heavy lifting. Irmandinos, again, you've got free impetuous smoke covering the battlefield. That can be very handy for covering the approach of your dog warrior, whatever it may be. These guys are all specialists. They are all lethal at close combat and close range, very good for defending your deployment zone. You've got the tractor mule battery here if you want to spend the orders to restrain them from moving out. There's even this special tractor mule here I've added in here because it's got mines, which is quite fun for defending. If there's a drop trooper coming nearby and you get an ARO and you don't really have a good option with your gun, you can just lay the mine there. That could be very useful. And of course the boarding shotgun Strelok, mainly just there as a button presser out in the midfield and to be a liaison officer. So again, TAC, if you like TAC, if you've got the Cold Front models, you might want to work them into a list that looks a little bit like this, because this is going to serve you well in a lot of different missions, in my opinion. And we're over to Hakislam. Good old Hakislam. Now, it might be a bit intimidating to have so many irregular orders in your list, but honestly, if you're playing Hakislam, you're going to be getting used to that, and really that's going to be something you have to sort of learn to love. If you really want to, you could just ditch the Daylamis and just have an extra regular order in there, or upgrade something to be a higher quality unit and not take as many troops. But the thing about Hakislam is that often their best troopers are the irregular models anyway. So looking at it, you've got the 4 Muteiwas, probably the most broken profile in the game. You've got the Jammers, Emirats, Smoke Grenades, Chain Rifle, all on a 5-point model, definitely worth it. I've got the Liberto in there as well. Again, just too good not to take, even though you're wanting to be adding more regular orders in there. I don't care. The Liberto is just too strong not to be in there. Farzan, Fort Observer as the liaison officer / button presser. Lasik, just because there's nothing really else in the list which helps you to snipe and just cover that long-range game. You don't want to sort of be at the last turn of the game and having nothing powerful to stop their coming out of hiding and just jumping over the trenches and coming towards the middle. Now, you've got the 3 powerhouses here. Al-Jabal, one of the most feared impersonators in the game. Once you start to get used to using impersonators, you're going to really appreciate what this guy can do. Tariq Mansouri, because of Fatality level 2, is overpowered, undercosted, kind of broken. So if you get the opportunity to cross the battlefield, if they happen to be hiding from you, that guy is going to wreck a lot of things and ruin a lot of people's days. The Mukhtar is there because you're going to have so much free smoke going up because of the Muteiwas. And he's 6'2", can actually move up into range with his Red Fury quite quickly. And his stats and special abilities, oh my god, just crazy. I can't believe they've got NWI and Shock Immunity. He's got 4 deployment and mimetism. He's got Red Fury and 2 nanopulses. He's got Bliss Skill 13. It just gets crazier and crazier and crazier. He's such an undercosted unit in my opinion. And then there's the Daylamis. So these guys are either going to be attacking right off the get-go, or if you fail their infiltration rolls, they're just Panzerfaust at the back of your deployment zone helping to defend. Very, very strong. And everything else here is basically a cheerleader, just doing a little bit of utility. The Krakot as well, great for trading. I mean, everything in this list is good for trading, basically. Trading for more expensive stuff. If you can, try to go first, wherever possible. If you're just getting into Hakislam and you're trying to win, you're trying to make a list like this work, take first turn no matter what the dice say, no matter what mission it is, because this is the most aggressive faction in the game, in my opinion. And when I say aggressive, I mean your pathways to winning generally involve attacking as quickly and as effectively as possible. Other factions tend to do that in a bit more of a measured, structured way, and a bit more of a careful, calculated way. This is a faction where you're trying to get Al-Jabal across there and attack. Tariq's charging through to attack. The Daylamis are trying to infiltrate and attack. The Muteiwas are streaming up the board. Yeah, it's aggressive. So try and get aggressive right off the bat if you can. Coming over to Hassassin Baram, we've basically just taken everything I've just talked about, and we're kind of dialing it up a notch as well, because these guys in their sectorial, you can still take the 4 Muteiwas. Note that I've just spread one of them across to Group 1 because there's just so many irregular orders in Group 2 from this list. And there's 4 Daylamis up from 2. I'm trying to take advantage of the fact that they're available at 5. I wasn't crazy enough to get the 5th one in there, but again, it's about attacking. So you're trying to go first. You're putting all the Daylamis next to their deployment zone. The Muteiwas providing smoke for your move forward. The major difference between this list and the previous list is that instead of having Tariq there, we've actually got a pretty robust link team which can actually put out some pretty high damage, high ballistic skill shooting, because you've got an Asawira, which is BS14 to start with and has the full bonus of the link. And then you've got the HMG if the target's too far away, Sniper if you want to react, and all these Govards have MSV1, so that helps to deal with mimetism and ODD, that kind of thing. So what you're doing is you're having the first phase of just shoving Al Jabal and all the Dale armies down their throat and trying to just get some damage done. And then later in the game, you'll be consolidating Group 1, possibly moving things with command tokens and getting Group 1 ready to go, and just moving out with the Aswira and just bopping anything that's left. So this is one way to play Assassin Baram. It's not the only way. I mean, if you want to delete all of this and just buy some Mu'yibs and have like a nice solid list with Mu'yibs and go for the inventory and the arsenal, that's another way to play this. You could also have the Ghulam link team. But in my study of this faction, I've found that the Govard link team with the Asawira is the most solid way to do it, in my view. And even though it seems like it's a bit overkill to have so much irregular orders and that would get out of control, these guys don't need to have a lot of orders spent on them, seriously. The Mutaiwas, with one Impetuous and one irregular order on themselves, they usually find themselves in total cover at the end of that, and they're providing the jammer for the rest of the game. Very rarely do you need to restrain these guys. It's just very, very effective. We've got the two Camille's and the Ghulam here in this team, purely just on the off chance that maybe you really want to restrain one Ghazi Mutaiwa, because otherwise it's going to get hit by a missile launcher and it's going to splash other things as well. But quite often you don't really need that. And you know, you've got 4 command tokens, just make sure that you use them really wisely when you're doing this kind of thing. But yeah, Assassin Baram, if you like the idea of that, if you like Govards, this could be quite a powerful faction for you. And if you're intimidated by the whole big swarming 20 order sort of spam, then by all means just cut it down to a group of Mu'yibs and build a list around that. QK, so this is sort of a part mercenary version of the faction, and you can take 3 Yuan-Yuans. I have taken all 3. We've got the Evo repeater in there because of that, because you may want to land them. But outside of that, there's the HMG, which also benefits from the Evo, being able to have assisted fire. The list is mostly about this main link team here with the heavy-duty Janissaries and Hafsas. Hafsas really help to disguise what's really in the link team, although your opponent will suspect if they have any experience with this game. And Wild Bill. I love the fact that when he joins the Janissaries and Hafsas, he makes a link so deadly once they get across onto the opponent's side of the board. If they're going in for the kill, if you have that opportunity to win that way, your opponent's feeling a bit vulnerable, you can see stuff out of position, moving through, coming around corners with Wild Bill and his rifle plus multi-pistols is just going to be devastating. QK, not one of the stronger factions in infiNity, but if you're really dead set on them and you like the look of them, something like this will be competent. You can really win games with a list like this, because it's got the midfield button presser, it's got the ARO clearance HMG, it's got the missile launcher for defense. You've got the doctor to revive him if he goes down. You've got the long range sort of the long threat range once you move into their territory with Wild Bill. If they're hiding everything they've got, dropping the Yuan-Yuans next to them may work. There's a lot of different angles to come in from. And Rama, the last sectorial here will do for Hakislam. I wanted to build a Tariq core link for you guys just because I think that it's so oppressive and disgusting. You don't have to play Rama this way. There are a lot of other different interesting profiles you can put in there. There's the Hortlax and the regular Janissaries and the Alpha Seed and you name it. I mean, there's a lot of different choices. But I wanted to show you guys a list that has Tariq in the core link and that isn't a limited insertion list either. You can do it that way. But what I like about this is that if you're going second, you might be able to slow them down by having Tariq sort of poking out of partial cover, the Shihab HMGs hanging around, covering off parts of the battlefield, distant sectors. And once you've survived their first turn, you can move a few things into Group 1 and then have that 12 order turn where you push out with Tariq. and gunning things down with Fatality level 2 Spitfire full link with super jump as well is so powerful. One thing Shishkin can't do is to super jump and find those angles, whereas Tariq can do that. Also, when they see you coming and they're throwing smoke grenades in desperation, you then just switch over to the Kawarij, who has the MSV2, and you can kill them that way. This is a group which has the NCO in there, and that's how you're getting 12 orders. The 2 lieutenant orders from that could be spent on the Ghulam NCO, so we can move the whole link team up. If you're really worried about some ARO that is going to murder the team, like a hidden deployment missile launcher, or a regular missile launcher for that matter, you can put a smoke in the way of a particular fire lane, move past it, and get the kills elsewhere on the battlefield. I love the Tuareg being there. There are also a lot of things which are going to try and attack you and disrupt your army are going to be hackable. So having him out in the midfield could be a bit of a clutch game saver. But he's also a very high willpower specialist, which is good at attacking and fighting in the midfield also. Rifle plus light shotgun plus mines is going to allow him to get the better of a lot of opponents out in the midfield. And Monstrucker, of course, with the Nazmat, very important because you might have your 2 TR bots spread out. So Monstrucker plus Nazmat going to be able to revive them, forcing your opponent to try and remove them. And if nothing happens with him in your turn, you just use the irregular order to throw a drop bear down next to your deployment to help further protect the Shihabs. So I think it's solid. Again, if you're a dedicated infiNity player and you're experienced, your lists are probably going to look different because you're playing for specific missions and you've got specific ideas about playing the faction in mind. But if you just want to get a bunch of models that are going to be roughly effective, this will do that for you. Okay, we're on to Nomads now, and again, every time we look at a vanilla faction, there's so many ways you can do it, so many angles you can come from. You can have a big list or a small list. You can have a massively hacking heavy list, or you can have a massively shooting heavy list, or whatever you want to do. But I've tried to include a smattering of things that tend to make Nomads good in this, because Nomads are a very powerful and popular faction. And new players may just be wondering, well, what stuff do I put in the list? Well, here's what you could do. Kariza Borak is a very forgiving attack model which will clear the hell out of a lot of ARO pieces. It's hard to go wrong with it. If you do get unlucky and he goes down, there is a Daktari sitting right next to him. If they're hiding their troops, well, you can move over there with your Liberto if you want to, or your Morlocks, especially if they pick up any speed boosts. This list probably does suffer a little bit from being able to actually attack and flush them out of hiding spots. But it's very good in defense, thanks to the Intruder, obviously. The Jammer being there, the Heckler, of course. You've got your Puppet Master, purely for the sake of counterintelligence, really, really useful. And for defending your deployment zone, the Morlocks and Jaguar there, they're able to throw smoke to help the Intruder. And the Zeros being out in the midfield, liaison officers there, plenty of button pressing potential. And obviously the hacking through Mary Problems, she synergizes with the Moran's repeater that he comes with. Crazy Koalas for even more zone denial, control, defense kind of thing. So it's a strong list. It's not a very optimized list. I mean, if I was playing Nomads myself, I'd make some sacrifices here and there just to make one particular role really off the chain, brutally powerful, and try and build my game plan around that. So once you get a bit more experience with infiNity, you would be modifying this list and making it, you'd be min-maxing it. You'd be making it weaker in one area and stronger in another area, and trying to make the game, your opponent come to fight your battles in this one area where it's strong, if you know what I'm saying. But again, if you're new, you don't know what you're doing, you just want to have some models that are going to be roughly effective, this is a good template to start with. Moving to Corregidor, which is the first sectorial of Nomads we'll look at. These guys get access to McMurrah. You can and should take McMurrah in all of your Corregidor lists. He is that broken. The Alguacile link is probably the way to go, especially since Mobile Brigadas can join it, which makes them very, very effective and efficient now. Missile Launcher is my preference, very, very good defense. If you're attacking with the link team, you can move in with the Cyclone, who now counts as a Mobile Brigada, and the Cyclone can actually have assisted fire added to him. In fact, have I forgotten to take... No, I've got Jazz right there. So Jazz has, for some reason, a hacking device with Maestro and a helper bot who's 6 points regular order for some crazy reason. So, too good not to take. She goes in there automatically. and she can add assisted fire to the Cyclone in the Link team, who starts to get a bit nutty with moving across the board, blasting things on 18s with 5 dice and ignoring their cover, blah blah blah. So yeah, pretty crazy. Intruder, of course, staple nomad unit. We've got plenty of Jaguars to defend the deployment zone and put the smoke down for the Intruder. I had enough points left over for this Tomcat, which I thought was quite cool. The Tomcat is a nice cheap way of outmaneuvering them if you're having a bit of a hard time, finding an opening for McMurrow or your Cyclone or whatever it may be. Later in the game, the Tomcat might show up to surprise them. Very good at moving just carefully enough to put down the mine so that it's actually... the mine itself has a line to detonate on them before the Tomcat does, and then the Tomcat does come around and start shooting them. They react, the mine goes off as well. You could occasionally catch a target with their pants down with the emitter, maybe. I forgot to mention the Bandit also. The Bandit could be pretty cool because not only is it a liaison officer, it can actually fight quite well in close combat. I thought I had a deployable repeater, but I'm thinking of the 28-point model. That would increase Jazz's range for her Maestro, but it's not really that important. If you want her to Maestro something, the Cyclone in the Link team fires the pitcher, lands it pretty reliably, and then Jazz can just Maestro, whatever they've got, which is kind of scary to be honest. So very strong Corregidor list actually. Now that I look at it, it's got a lot of tools, and it's got a strong option for all of the roles you need it to do. So great place to start if you like Corregidor. Here's a bit more of a questionable list, really. Bakunin, yeah. The thing about Bakunin is that you're either going to be going probably with a Moderator Link team or a Riot Girls Link team. The thing about the Moderators is they can't have any big beefy troops join them like other factions can now do. So that makes the Moderators a little bit weak, and if you're not really playing a faction for the Link teams or the availability of certain units, well, why are you bothering to play a faction like Bakunin in the first place? So I think most Bakunin players will go, right, well, the best way to leverage the sectorial is to take lots of zeros or lots of Sanitas that we can take, or we'll make a massive team of Moiras or Riot Girls. My thinking is just to take the Moderators anyway, just because they're a nice cheap group of orders. Sometimes they're going to get damage done with the multi-sniper, but not that much. The pitchers can be very useful for firing those out and then getting some hacks off with your zeros. I've put the Lizard in there, interestingly, because I think that this is a list which can win even if the Lizard dies. If it's in partial cover and they spend their entire turn killing it, you can still get them back with the other stuff in your list. The Morlocks can do the job. The Bakunin Uberfall Commando can do the job. It can be hard, but they do have the potential for that. But a lot of the time, the Lizard's going to survive. And if you are up against an opponent that's hiding things, is sort of sitting there and just laughing, at your ability to crack them, you could always just spend the turn lobbing the heavy grenades over to them. I think that works quite well. I haven't even included an engineer, just because the engineer option in this faction, the Clockmaker, is a bit costly. And the other reason I've taken the Lizard is because the Moderators at just Bliss Skill 10, going up to 13 in the Link, it's not really the best way of shooting, and the Lizard gives you a nice solid BS 14, Fatality Level 1, Tactical Awareness, Multi-HMG to actually get some blapping done, get some shooting done. It does have a Tactical Awareness order as well, so that's going to be at least one go with the Heavy Grenade Launcher per turn throughout the game, even if you don't, spend any other orders on him. So if you, in your first turn, you're just making a push with the Chimera and Pupniks, getting a bit of damage done with them, then in turn 2, it's all about the zeros, then in your final turn, you're moving out with the Moderators, and the Lizard has just been an ARO piece the entire game, well, at least you would have been able to shoot 3 times with your Heavy Grenade Launcher while it was doing that. So I don't mind it, and other than that, you've got a pretty big, robust list with a lot of troops in it, to be honest. I kind of like it. It's a bit flimsy in some ways, and I think you guys maybe prefer the Riot Girls. But if you want a way of playing a big Bakunin list which has a variety of different tools in it, this is one way that you could do it. I'm not too sure if everybody will agree with my approach to it, but hey, if you're brand new to infiNity and you for some reason wanted to start with Bakunin and you bought the specific set of models, you would find ways of winning games with this setup, no matter which opponent you had. because everything can be solved with at least one of the options in here, in my view. Yeah, let me know what you think. Okay, Jurisdictional Command of Tunguska. So these guys provide the Hollow Mint core link. A lot of people like playing just with the Hollow Man Castle. Quite a difficult nut to crack. So 5 Hollow Men plus the Spectres can be one way to go. Another way to go is to run Perseus and have him with the Securitates. That can be pretty cool. What I like to do is to have a nice, well-rounded, balanced list. I've played at least 4 games with this particular setup here, and I quite like it. If, again, they're hiding a lot of things, you need to charge over there with the Zonnaut, you can do that. The Hollow Man, even though he's not in a link, I find him quite useful for solving problems out in the midfield. He's very resilient. He can help defend to certain spots with the combination of Chain Colt, Spitfire. Spitfire goes into Suppression Fire quite well. Super Jump for getting rid of annoying camo targets out in the midfield on top of buildings. You jump up there, reveal them with a Discover or Intuitive Attack with the Chain Colt. Can be very, very effective. Puppet Master, purely in there for counterintelligence. The Securitates can move out late game with the HMG, but the Grenza being there with the multi-sniper in the link team I think is a very strong ARO piece. You got that Aktari in case he goes down. He is armor 3, so he's got that. He doesn't have shock immunity, so be careful. Spectre Fort Observer for getting the button pressing done. Obviously, Heckler Jammer, you'd always want one of those with the Fast Panda to help out with memory problems. She's a very good late game specialist because she can do shooting and attacking as well as a lot of hacking. And you don't really need a regular hacker in this list because you're not trying to add assisted fire to any robots in here. You're doing the attacking with your other 2 Spitfires or your HMG or your multi-sniper. So I find it quite a well-rounded, well-balanced list. And as I said before, I'm trying to provide new players with a solid template for playing a new faction before you get to the phase of min-maxing things and introducing weaknesses into your list for the sake of boosting the strengths in other areas and trying to force your opponent to deal with those strengths, if you guys follow me. Okay, moving on to Combined Army. This is probably my favorite faction in infiNity the game. It's a vanilla faction, so there's so many ways to play it. You can take a massive list or a small list. You can take an avatar-themed list. You can take a list that's mostly mercenaries and still do well with that. So many different options. I wanted to show you guys my list, which has the Charonted and the Anathematic, because this is one thing that only Combined Army can do. You've got 2 heavy infantry models, which are approximately 80 points each, and you still make it work. And the way you make it work is that the 2 big bad boys here are extremely resilient. They can take a lot of AROs and then duck back into partial cover into total cover from partial cover because they can go prone. And you've got the Shrouded Mine Layer with Dazer out in the midfield to help protect them. If you look through some of my bat reps on my infiNity channel, you'll see me playing a list like this a few times. It has been pretty effective, I've found. This list that we're looking at here probably isn't as powerful as some of the other lists that I'm showing you in this video. I don't think it's quite as good for winning tournaments as, say, that Varuna list we looked at, or even that recent Corregidor list we looked at, or we'll look at Deschat later on. I mean, some of these lists are pretty strong. This list can have some struggles, but for a newer player, once you get your head around how to just position that Charonted, position the Noctifer, wait for them to come to you, get some shots off, and then when it's your turn, charge across there with your Anathematic, getting some kills in with your Plasma Rifle. It's a very powerful attack piece when you get the right angles with it. Yes, he's hackable, but he's Willpower 16 with BTS 6, and the EI hacking device allows him to use Sucker Punch, so he actually holds his own pretty well against enemy hackers, and he has Stealth, moving past them without being hacked in a lot of cases. Pretty strong. But yeah, this is obviously just an example of something you can do with Combined Army, which can be effective. If you like the idea of playing something unique, making use of the EI aspects, you've got 2 of them in there. But again, if it's not for you, you can just make a pretty normal combined army list by, putting the Q drone in, a regular hacker, maybe a Fractar, a Mark Rep tracker, some Dacherazis, a bunch of Hungries or Tiger Creatures and Shroudeds, and just have your normal, robust 15-16 order kind of list with all of those sort of tools being presented, and it's not too hard. I mean, you can check out some of my other videos for what I do with Combined Army normally, but this is quite a special way of playing them. Alright, for people who are fans of the Morats, here is a list which I played very recently against a Tohar opponent and narrowly won the game, spoiler alert. Have a look for that in my last few posted videos, Morats versus Tohar, for how that went. I find this to be a pretty good all-rounder list for Morats nowadays, because you've got that order battery sitting there with the cheap Gakis and Pretas being regular because of the link team. If you ever want to move out with them, they can be really good at jamming up enemies by throwing the smoke first and then charging them with the close combat troops, or just using the Red Fury as a battering ram, shooting things as you normally would. But a lot of the time you just hang around in total cover. With Kornak in his squad, he's got a tactical awareness order there, and he's got another order from Strategos. So if you're going first and they strip 2 orders from the pool, you're still going back up to 10 thanks to those abilities. Or if you're going second and you haven't lost anything from Group 1, that's a 12 order push. And moving out there with your BS-13 Heavy Infantry Trooper with your HMG, or Kornak and his Mark 12, Blitzskull 14, there's not a lot that you can't kill with this little trio if you're willing to commit them. And then in Group 2, you can put assisted fire on the Q drone, shoot things long range that way to maybe pick off a few targets that will get in the way of Kornak's run, then send them out. A bit of an eyebrow raise that I've got the Zerat multi-sniper, but there's points left over for specifically that model after you've taken everything else that you need to take. And it's not terrible. The Zerat probably wants to wait a little bit for good chances to set up the arrows or things to snipe. If you just leave him watching the table right from the start of the game, the enemy are going to find good ways of killing him. But if you're a bit cagey with it, if you only cover certain angles or just watch your deployment zone to start with, then move them out. If they can't afford to send things out to the middle of the table to win at the end of the game without dealing with your AROs, well, you set up the Zerat at that point, and hopefully the first group of troopers has just beaten them and softened them up so much that they've lost the tools they need to, at that point, deal with the Zerat. He's also got anti-personnel mines, which a lot of defensive snipers don't have. So if it's hanging around your deployment zone and you find a drop trooper or impersonator showing up next to you, you can always just throw them down at your feet. Okay, Shazvasti. I've tried to make a list which really emphasizes Shishkin, because that's the scariest thing about Shazvasti. In most people's minds. There'll be a few people out there who disagree with me and think, no, the Dazer is better with the Sphinx and that's more powerful, or no, it's about all the Tiger Creatures, no, it's about the 2 Speculo Killers. The Shazvasti is a strong faction. I mean, there are a few different ways you can do it. But if you're new and you just want to get something which is going to be bluntly and blatantly effective, there are fewer, easier ways to do that than just having Shishkin sitting there in the link team. She's the lieutenant, but you've got the chain of command Caliban in case she does die. Hopefully she doesn't. Then you've got a 5-man link team. You've got the Tensho for veteran, just in case you get jammed and you need to get close to an objective. The hacker to put assisted fire on your T-drone for defending. Regular knocks, why not? And yeah, just try and defend until it's your turn, and then when it's your turn, you can push out there and rip just about anything up with your BS-18 5 dice fatality level 2 thing. It's pretty crushing. Q-drone, in case there's something that you don't want to risk Shishkin against, perhaps. He's also very good at defending, obviously. I thought about showing you guys a 10 order list. If you want to make this just limited insertion, I'd recommend Shishkin plus the Gwylo heavy rocket launcher plus the M-drone FTO in a Harris team. And everything else is just specialists and Noctifers and Speculos or whatever you want to put in there for 10 orders. But I'm showing you guys a 2-group list because the Tiger Creatures really are one of the better things about the sectorial. They're so good for defense and offense. Please remember, unlike me, that they have 6th Sense level 1, so they're just so hard to get the better of without them having an opportunity to trade. I like the double action close combat weapon ones because it's so easy to find ways to get them in to berserk their opponents and make sure that they can confirm the kill with not only a crit but an additional armor save with the double action, and also makes them anti-material for bashing up things like looting and sabotaging objectives. I've got the Noctifer there, of course. Big fan of the Noctifer. Very easy model to use if you're a newer player. Just put in hidden deployment on top of a sniper tower or wherever you can see the battlefield and launch it when you're ready. Maybe don't launch it straight away. Don't have to launch it at the first opportunity. Just launch it once you see a really juicy target that your opponent can't afford to lose and start letting rip with that dice. Shrouded Assault Hacker. Yes, you can take a Killer Hacker instead. I just like taking an Assault Hacker because Shasvasti, if they have a weakness, it's the fact that they are a bit squishy. They seem to fold a little bit under pressure, and the more ways you can find to slow your opponent down until it's your turn, the better. And sometimes they're going to be moving across with a tag or a bulleteer or a Sujian or whatever it might be, Rushi, and the Assault Hacker might be your opportunity to slow them down. And the Tiger Creature is also able to do that also, and the Noctifer. Group 2 is basically entirely about slowing down the enemy. So Flash Pulse R-Drone, Assault Hacker, Noctifer, 2 Tiger Creatures. To get through that, it takes quite a lot, and then they've got to get through to your Link team, of course. So pretty robust list in terms of the tools. It has a ton of potential. You're going to have some games where you really just devastate your opponent because you rolled too many crits with Shishkin. So if you're looking for a way of getting into Shasvasti and you've bought Wildfire and you want to expand, this is a pretty sickening list to do that with. But by all means, it's not the only way to play Shasvasti, obviously. You can just as equally well go for your Sphinx 10 order list, or lots and lots of Tiger Creatures, or just abandon Shishkin altogether and go for a couple of Speculo Killers. There are a lot of really cool ways to play this sectorial. Onyx Contact Force, another one of my favorites personally. You would always, in most of your lists, you would always have Kurnau and the combination of Plasma Sniper and Tinbot Deflector, because that benefits Kurnau himself for hacking. He's so good at firing that pitcher across the table and getting the Maestro into enemy targets. Very juicy. You've got the Lieutenant, who can actually hang right at the back of the table, but if needs be, spend a command token, bring him into the link if you happen to have lost one of the members here, or Kurnau specifically, and reform the link, hopefully. Q-Drone HMG, very good if you don't want to commit your Plasma Sniper, or if you just want a bit more defense at the back, with the Mimetism very strong. The E-Drone here replaces the regular Nexus Hacker that sometimes you would take. I love the E-Drone because it's used in combination with a Fractar for the free control jump. Secondarily, being able to re-roll your dice when you hack your opponent, because Kurnau is going to be looking for the hacking snipes, really good for re-rolling that. Just some of the support where this guy can do, really, really useful. And he has Exile, so Kurnau landing that pitcher next to their Link team, you can try exiling them, and basically models that didn't think they were going to be hacked suddenly become hackable just because they're in a Link team, and the Exile might pop them out of that, which could be a brutal way of dealing with something like a Varuna Kamau Sniper in a Link team if you're too reluctant to shoot at it with the Q-Drone or the Plasma Sniper, for example. The Lignos Hacker, very cheap for what he can do. Another great button presser in the midfield. Note that he does have a Dazer, so if you are expecting your opponent to make a push towards the center of the table for some objectives and they don't have a lot of multi-terrain stuff, that Dazer could be really annoying for them making progress into the midfield. Also, Greif Operator. The Fractar and the Greif Operator are there because the weakness of this kind of list is that without these two guys, there isn't a lot that can get to grips with and attack an opponent who's defending, right off the bat. Whereas the Greif Operator is going to deploy next to their deployment zone. The Fractar is going to be able to drop in, take a chain rifle hit on the chin, and keep going. So you kind of need them because the Unidrons are a bit too slow and static. It takes quite a lot of effort to uproot them and move them out across the field. And the Q-Drone, again, same sort of thing. You've got to move out there, find the targets. It can take a while. Whereas the Fractar and the Greif Operator typically are ready to go when you need them to be, when it's your turn to attack. So quite a well-rounded Onyx list. If you're liking Onyx, you want to get started. Obviously, if you want to, you could go for the Samaritan plus the Zeodrons, or put an Overdron in there, or you could play a Sphinx list. There are a few other archetypes for Onyx, but this is a pretty safe, solid, standard list, which is going to give you a variety of different kinds of games, which I'd recommend. We're now on to Aleph. So, starting with vanilla Aleph. Again, I'm notorious for this, but I am going to show you guys a vanilla Aleph list, which has a few mercenaries in it, so not so much all robots, but there's 2 Crackot Renegades, both with Red Furies, and there's a Liberto there as well. The thing about Aleph as a faction is that they don't have a lot of cheap expendable throwaway troops which can just, trade with enemy models effectively. But because they have access to these mercenaries, that rounds out that weakness of the faction. So having the Cracots there with their chess mines and their metachemistry, and the Liberto with his camo state and his chain cult dogged, all that kind of fun stuff, means that if they've got some cheap nasty troops out there which you really need to remove, you don't have to go and sacrifice a Dazio or something like that to do that. You can charge in a Liberto or a Crackot, take a mine to the face, and still berserk them or chest mine them or Red Fury them or whatever you need to do to remove that crucial piece of the puzzle, and then you can move in with your more experienced veteran troops that are very effective at the long game. Speaking of which, Dakini, great for moving out and mopping things up because of assisted fire coming from the proxies. Dazju and Naga, combination out in the midfield, very good specialists, very good at conserving their own lives and getting to the grips of what they need to do. Dazju, extremely potent when it does come out of hidden deployment. You can pick your targets, and with Tio Camo, Bliss Skill 12, NWI, it's just so good at getting the better of enemy infiltrators. A single movement on there for smoke. It's nice to have at least one smoke thrower in the list for situations where you want to protect your lieutenant from a drop trooper, or just moving out and putting smoke in the way of enemy arrows when it's your turn to move in and grab objectives. And then of course there's the beautiful proxies. Wouldn't be in a left list without these. They're probably the most broken thing in a left, to be honest. The Hacker, very useful for putting assisted fire on the Dakini. The Proxy Mark II, an amazingly undercosted and powerful ARO piece which shows up just when you need it. And the Mark V, for just 10 points more, an amazing specialist doing stuff in the midfield with the double SMG, nanopulse, EM grenades, just so well equipped. Can't believe it has NWI for all of that, and for deployment. It's just a bit silly, really. So, pretty good template for vanilla Aleph. Again, I keep saying this, but obviously you can play Aleph by having a Marut in a 10 order list, or you can have the Greeks in there. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. But again, if you're just looking at a collection of models where all of the models in your collection are going to comprise a very effective, robust list, which is going to win in a lot of situations, a lot of different missions, something that looks like this might be a good place to start. Steel Phalanx. Now, I'm a bit disappointed with this list that I've written because it is, unfortunately, just a crutching on Achilles and Hector sort of list. As I was preparing this YouTube video, what I did was I made a 16 order list which had all the Thorakites, and a lot of the robots, the probots, and all the Lameds and stuff like that. And I thought, well, if you've really made the decision to play Steel Phalanx, it's probably because you like the idea of the Greek mythology and the elite troopers and the close combatants, and showing you guys a starter list that doesn't really have any of that is a bit lame. And the 15 to 16 order type Steel Phalanx list, although it's pretty good, it's not really as strong as the other factions' versions of that. So if you compare it to like a Nomad's list that has the order Sprinter spread out around 16 orders, or Combined Army, or whatever you might look at there, it just doesn't really do it as well. Whereas, when you go for a limited insertion Steel Phalanx list, that's when it becomes a bit more interesting. Now, I'm not saying this list is bad. If you play it well in the right matchups, it's really just going to stomp some people. Achilles by himself is just really difficult to deal with when he's just got 10 orders just to power down the side of the field. The thing about this combo here is that in some tabletops, some matchups, Achilles is just going to be uncontested and he's going to get the kills and win you the game. In matchups where he's not able to do that, well, you can push out with Hector instead and hopefully find the path to victory like that. If you're defending, that's when it becomes a bit tougher. I do recommend using Achilles and Hector as ARO pieces, but not, beyond that sort of 24-inch range. Have them sort of watch shorter angles as they approach your lines. Chusa can shoot from deployment zone to deployment zone, but again, he may get outclassed by things that have like albedo, anything that's just going to have really high burst and shock ammunition kind of thing. It's a bit rough. Just be careful with where you position them, because it's better to just put them in total cover and not use them for the first turn than it is to give your opponent like a target which they can very easily shoot and remove. So yeah, try to make sure that they come into contact with Achilles and Hector first, and put them in such a position where they can pop off a couple of arrows to slow them down, then pull back into total cover by going prone, and wait until it's your turn, and then use your turn to try and kill the low-hanging fruit, get the easy kills, retreat, try and sort of last the whole game with them until you see that opening to do that big killing blow where you just push in and destroy them. Playing this list against experienced opponents is really going to be about patience a lot of the time, but if you're a new player, it can really be fun to have these massive 70-point, dudes with all of their, all of their character and style to play around with. Can be quite fun. But yeah, definitely not the only way to do it. A lot of Steel Phalanx players will just remove Achilles and Hector and have Machaon and Phoenix and Ajax in there, and have several linked teams, and have the Thorakites there and the Dactyls and that kind of thing. That's probably a more sensible way to play it. But again, if you're new and you just want to get into it and you want to have some big Greek heroes, this is a place to start. Like it will actually work for a newer player, I think. And you've got all the tools you need to win the scenarios as well. A lot of it really is just going to come down to Hector and his few boys there moving out to the right part of the battlefield and just setting up camp. Alright, this is a list that I've played many times before. It's basically written itself. I can't think of any ways to improve it. It is the OSS sectorial list, and it's really strong. Some people prefer to remove the Diva and put in another Dakini, maybe a sniper in there instead, but I like to have the ability to play this link team aggressively, and the MSV2 Diva is way more aggressive than another Dakini heavy weapon. The MSV2 means that there's just no hiding from her. At long range though, the HMG is pretty much the best long range aero clearance, attacking piece in the game, pretty much. It's up there. Maybe it's not the best, but it's up there. You're talking Bliss skill 14, ignoring cover. You've got mimetism 5 dice. It just goes on and on and on. If you do get hit and he goes down, he's got remote presence. You bring him back up with a Sophotect. You've got the Shukra to give not only Strategos level 1 an extra order to the group, but counterintelligence. So if they strip an order off the group, you get it back again with Strategos, and you're always going to have a 10 order push if you go first. If you're going second, there's a 12 order push out with this link team, which is again why I like the Diva in there. Then in your second group, you've got a massive 6 order group with the Dazu and all of the proxies. I've got the heavy rocket launcher there instead of the forward observer, because the Dazu's doing the forward observing. But the heavy rocket launcher, again, another amazing ARO piece to really slow them down until it's your turn. Then when it is your turn, that Dakini Link team is really going to go balls to wall, killing just about everything. It's a really solid, well-rounded list, and very fearsome. Toha. So, as I was saying before, when you get really heavily into playing a faction and you try and design lists for specific missions, you will make some sacrifices, and there are some things you won't take, and you'll take some very specifically designed roles in there to complete very specific objectives. The list I'm showing you guys is a bit passive, and all I've done here is just thrown in the things that I find to be the most broken and powerful things about Toha, and really just made it a blunt instrument kind of list, which just leverages the symbiomates and wins in the long run just by out-attritioning enemy opponents. This is about as defensive as it gets. You've got the Sukiel HMG in a link team with the McCall and the Kumatail with the symbiomate on the Sukiel. So when it's your turn, you move out of cover and you're firing that Sukiel at just about anything you can that is standing up watching the table. Then you've got 3 auxiliars just as cheerleaders, the Corral to move out and throw down smoke, especially for the sake of the Gao Rail. The sectorial missile launcher is going to be an ARO piece, and an extremely annoying one at that. You've got the Lieutenant and the Keltar hanging back with it, just in total cover. They're never going to move anywhere. But that missile launcher, you've got to get through his symbiote, you've got to get through his ability to shoot you, and you've got to get through his symbiont armor before finally removing him. So if it's a very open table, this guy is just so freaking annoying to deal with. Then in Group 2, you've got the Sniper with the smoke laid down from the Corral, and you've got the Symbiomate on that as well. He's very good defensively and offensively. The Tagma's in there for counterintelligence, so if you're going first, you can have a 9 auto push with either your Corral or your Sukiel HMG Link team. And there's even a free-range McCool at the back. I quite like him just because you've got an extremely impetuous free Eclipse grenade to go down. That can be a great way of starting off if you're up against an MSV2 sniper who might be shooting at your Corral as you plan on moving out, and if you want to move out before you attack with, say, the Sukiel. But it's just, this list leverages symbiomates and symbiont armor really, really hard. As you start to get more advanced with Tohar and you become a better and better Tohar player, you might stop relying on symbiomates so much. You'll find things your opponents can do to get around them, and you'll start taking more specific models like the Impersonators, like the Drop Trooper, maybe even the Tag. You'll find different things you can do to surprise your opponent. This list really doesn't come up with a lot of surprises. It's just, balls to the wall, leveraging the broken stuff, and I think you'll appreciate that this list is so forgiving if you're new to Tohar. The Clipsos, of course, don't forget him. He's a really important piece for your button pressing and your mission completion, and your midfield presence with TO Trooper with mines. God, I hate coming up with against lists like this. It's not that much fun. Okay, we're finally into the Mercenaries now, the NA2. Got Druze. So Druze, very difficult faction to make lists for. In my opinion, they are the weakest faction in infiNity of the game. Don't let that deter you, though. Don't be disheartened by that comment. There are people who take Druze to tournaments and win a bunch of games with them. infiNity is more about how you play than what list you bring. Don't forget that. There are a few perks. By playing the sectorial, you get access to Scarface with the heavy rocket launcher. I prefer that over the Panzerfaust Scarface that other sectorials get. Scarface is going to be wanting to just sit in partial cover and soak up shots a lot of the time, and annoyingly your opponent can just pepper you at long range, and once you run out of ammunition from the Panzerfaust, you're really hard pressed to stop them from just firing straight into you without much penalty, whereas the heavy rocket launcher doesn't run out of ammunition, and if you do score a hit with it, it's got the template, it's got fire damage, it's quite threatening and dangerous. When you're attacking with Scarface, the heavy rocket launcher can be more useful than the Panzerfaust because it's burst 2, you can catch them off guard with the template, as I said, flame ammunition very useful. And when he goes unconscious, Joe Turner can just pop out of there with his boarding shotgun. Sometimes people forget about that. And Cordelia is a way of getting an engineer into the faction without having to take the brawler engineer, who's really overcosted and terrible, by the way. So you kind of want to take Scarface for that reason. Then when you come to the Link team, you see that you've got the MSV2 brawler. The Lieutenant doesn't have to be in the Link team. You can leave him out and join later if you want to. Replace the MSV2 sniper if it dies, but in the Link team you've got the multi-sniper, the light grenade launcher, which has EM and Nimbus grenades, can be quite practical and useful a lot of the time. This Druze has a shock marksman rifle. For 2 points less, you can take the Killer Hacker, which I think is probably better, because then it gives you the Pitcher Killer Hacker combo, which is quite surprisingly strong. But I had 2 extra points, so I put in the shock marksman rifle there. That might be better when you're moving out and shooting things mid-range. Valeria Gomez does do a pretty good job at firing the Pitcher and hacking them to death anyway, even with just Brain Blast. She's also there to put assisted fire onto your Clipper drone bot, who can be quite defensive if you can set him up in the right spot with the 5-man link bonus and assisted fire. Couple of Camille's as cheerleaders, you need those. Couple of Bounty Hunters, they can actually get some pretty good abilities with Booty level 2. Even if they don't, they make good cheerleaders and good deployment zone defense with their SMGs and arc light cannons. A couple more cheerleaders / deployment zone defense. Hunzakut, you need something to press buttons out there. Bashi Bazook, because you've just got pretty much nothing else to really take the fight to them on their side of the table. So at the very least, we've got a Bashi Bazook to do that. Note that there's no Saito Tugan, who can be a specialist operator in this faction. Honestly, the other version of Druze which I like is dropping Scarface altogether, dropping the Clipper, not really having any sort of fighting robots in the list at all, and putting in Saito Tugan, putting in this and that, and having a more human approach to it. That could be better. So if you want to play that kind of Druze list to begin with and you prefer the ninja, go that way. But if you're new to Druze and you like the idea of actually having Druze in there, well, you've got a couple of Druze right here, and Scarface is technically a Druze as well, so that at least keeps the theme going. Difficult faction to play. I would steer clear of Security Chief Arslan. I just don't think he's that good. Anaconda, similarly, not very good. Unfortunately, you can't make any linked bounty hunters, so don't take too many of them, I would say. The Peacemaker's a bit of a trap, but the Sierra Dronbot, nothing wrong with that, so maybe the Sierra Dronbot could go instead of the Clipper in some of your lists too. That's about all the advice I have for Druze, though. There is obviously a faction-specific video I did of them a while back, which is probably still relevant. JSA, so a classic, very old sectorial and much beloved sectorial, very thematic, probably the most thematic, successfully thematic sectorial in the game. Japanese Secessionist army. The real shame of this sectorial, the real problem, is that they have so many really cool units in the form of the Oniwaban, you've got Saito and Miyamoto Musashi and Yojimbo, Shinobu, Neko Oyama, and the problem is you can't have all of these guys in the same list, otherwise they're too starved for orders and you have one or two guys spending the orders and the other ones just sitting there doing very little, being very inefficient. So sadly, if you want to be competitive with JSA, I feel it's necessary to take some sacrifices, include a lot of kind of banal and comparatively boring stuff in your list relative to the super, characters. You can still take a few cool things, like I've got an Aragoto, that's pretty cool. I've got Yojimbo in there, he's pretty fun. Ninja, can't get much more JSA than a ninja. I've even got a Damaru as my lieutenant, so he's pretty awesome at slashing stuff in close combat if they get too close, but generally he's just a nice safe lieutenant, and there's going to be some situations where he's just going to throw an EM grenade with Specfire using his lieutenant order if there's something close by. Other than that, though, I mean, it's just a bog standard list. We've got a Kaisotsu Link team. The Kempai's there with the Shock Marksman Light Rifle, with his MSV2 to stack with the smoke being created by Yojimbo. Pretty safe and standard. The Kaisotsu here, if we put that out as an ARO, it might get shot because it's already Blister Skill 13 in the link, so they are a bit weak in that regard. I'm pretty sure I included something which could back them up and be added to the team. No, I didn't, so I've got to be careful about that. Tanko by himself, I quite like the singular Tanko because he just moves up the field on his own accord with him extremely impetuous. Sometimes firing his Flamen Spear, again using extremely impetuous. He's super cheap, and he's just this annoying little ARO piece around the flanks which fires his Flamen Spear or Contender as things show up around nearby. If he dies, it's not a huge loss, but with armor 3 and 2 wounds, he can quite often just guts prone into cover somewhere. And that becomes really annoying for them to deal with, and just having that extra regular order is really useful. Weibing for being the primary specialist until the ninja's ready to show up. Sometimes you don't want him to deploy and appear straight away. Other than that, though, Doctor's there to help with the Kaisotsus in case they go down. Engineer's there to revive the Husong Yao Kong. And you've got a nice, big, robust, 15, 16 order list, which has all of the tools. So if you want to play a JSA list which has some way of dealing with the various different problems that infiNity is going to throw at you, this will provide you with all of the options. Granted, it's not as cool as playing, say, an Oyuroi with 4 or 5 Damarus in a Link team. It's not as cool as playing a 10-order list that has like 3 ninjas, Oniwaban and Shinobu. But those kinds of lists are going to run into these problems which are way harder to deal with than the problems that this list will face. And again, like if you want to just strip this down to say 13, 14 orders, there's a couple of things you could drop to put in Shinobu in place of the Aragoto, or put in Mushashi instead of Yudamaru. There are ways to sub in the models that you think are cool. So if you're willing to play this as a basic guideline template, and you really desperately want to have a Shikami in there, it doesn't take too much to get that in there. So if you drop the ninja, for example, and we put in a Shikami, we throw in the assault pistol, Shikami, and then we drop, I don't know, the Weibing Yaokong. So you've got less specialists now, but the Shikami himself is a specialist. And yeah, I mean, you've got a perfectly good Shikami in there. So it's not too hard. This is the point I'm trying to make. It's not too hard to tweak this list to go towards the direction of having some of the cooler models that you might want to play with JSA. Then we come to Ikari Company. I've made a point of including the Karakuri in this list. Equally, the Karakuri could have featured in JSA as well. The reason why I want you guys to consider a Karakuri if you're a new player is that it's a total immunity trooper who is always armor 6 because of the way that total immunity works. You can use your BTS against armor saves or BTS saves, and it makes a great data tracker, something that can just be a specialist out in the midfield and just annoys them with AROs. You've got 2 wounds and dogged. It's quite effective for 43 points because of the buffs to total immunity. If you're willing to remove the Karakuri though, this list, takes on a few other different options. You can see here that I've got the ninja. I've only got 1 Yuan, so if you want to take a whole bunch of Yuans, getting rid of the Karakuri can be one way to do that. The Krakot Renegade's only got a submachine gun. If you want to take a more expensive Krakot, as I sometimes like to, that's another way to get that in there. I've got a Yuan here, but I think that I dropped Yojimbo out of this list, and I didn't take any Desperados. So if you prefer those guys, again, removing the Karakuri is going to be a way of doing that. The Kaisotsu's Plus Tanko is a brilliant link team because it's extremely cheap. It houses the Lieutenant, and you've still got that big, fat, juicy missile launcher ARO, which JSA can't do, by the way, in the core link team, unless you're going for like the full-on Tankos and Damaros all together. This just does it so much more cost-effectively. You've got the Brawler Sniper in with the 2 Tankos, so they're not impetuous, and they're a really nice little cute Harris to move around the field with a big toolbox. Note that you can do this with the Wooming instead. Sometimes that's better, but I like the Tankos because they're so cheap and they're way better than the Woomings are at close combat, and quite often you'll actually get into close combat with them. Liberto, too good not to take. Just a single Yuan. Don't even use that for attacking. I'd just bring that around my side of the table, throw the smoke to benefit the multispectral visor level 2. Again, you can play this the other way. You can get rid of the Karakuri, you can throw in the Evo repeater, put in all Yuans, put in some bikes, and have a much more smoke-heavy list. That's another way of doing it. You can put your Brawler MSV2 Sniper in with the Core Link team instead. That's another way of doing it. But what I've just described there are a few of the basic ways of playing Ikari that I've found to be effective. Give this Karakuri, though, a go. If you're just starting, there may be some really cool conversions you can do. I saw somebody have the Asura from the Beyond Cold Front set converted to have a kimono. That looked really awesome. If you can get something you're comfortable with, I think that's a nice way to start out. If you're new to the game, decided on Ikari right off the bat, this is a pretty good starting point. Starco, again, one of the sectorials I've had very little practice with. Not that familiar with. I personally like the idea of playing the Alguacil link team, the Brigada link team that has Senor Massacre and the Dactari, but I've decided to give you guys an example which has Emily plus the Alguacils, because when she's got the X-Visor and the normal plus EM grenades in there, it can be quite forgiving. If you just don't know what to do, you're brand new to infiNity, you're stuck, it's the middle of the game, you're just not too sure what you can do. At the very least, you might lob a few grenades out there with your excess orders that you haven't spent, and you're going to get some hits at some point, and your opponent's going to be crying. We've got Spectre in there. Once you start to get used to how to deploy him, where to find the spots and openings for him, how to sort of pick off targets one by one, you'll find this guy to be quite effective. Don't forget to use the Alguacil Hacker to put up assisted control jump if you're going to be landing him deep into enemy territory. He has physical 13, so quite easy to land him. The Brawler just hanging out by himself as the Lieutenant because he doesn't cost any SWCs. Note that the Alguacil Hacker can add assisted fire to your reaction Zond. If the Alguacil HMG is not going to be shooting from long range, the reaction Zond is. You might put them on two different sides of your deployment zone for that reason. Cyclone, if Rail Spectre doesn't have the chance to get in there, maybe moving up with a Spitfire to find some models which are hiding and need to be rooted out. I quite like this hard case. He's very good at trading against midfield pieces, and he's very cheap. Don't forget to spend his to turn his irregular order into a regular order by spending a command token to convert it. And his order, if you're not going to be activating him, his order can be used elsewhere in the group. Then we've got a bunch of Jaguars, mainly there for deployment zone defense. The Ermendino does the same thing as the Jaguars, but he moves up to press buttons and be a specialist also. El Hawa, very good liaison officer, and of course Daktari in case your Emily goes down or the HMG or the missile launcher gets shot. So yeah, it's got some options in there. It's got potential. You're kind of crutching a little bit hard on Spectre or the bots to get stuff done in terms of the shooting game, though. If you're running up against maybe tags or link teams which are out shooting you, it can get a little bit difficult to beat them. But hey, I mean, if things are going really terribly, or if you want to take a risk, you can start bombarding them with Emily and hope that you get a hit with your EM grenade onto their onto their link team or their tag or whatever it may be, and then move in with Raoul or your machine guns, and that would be a pretty different story if you're going up against a tag that's immobilized or a link team which has been isolated and the link's broken. So there is that. Getting there. Okay, Spiral Core. I did a video on Spiral Core recently. One thing I've learned here is that obviously taking 2 Drals and a Keelsan is not the only way to play this. If you have a look at my recent video on Spiral Core, you will see my list version there. The only problem with that is that you end up with a group 2 which is very small, and I think if you're starting Spiral Core, you probably want a list which has a lot of different options in it, a lot of different angles, to come towards winning that game. So what I've done for you is I've included Jan Star, who's very powerful if you're taking first turn. This guy incentivizes you to probably take first turn more often than not. Kirail to create the smoke grenades, which will be used by your Tagma Multispectral Visor Viral Sniper in the Link team in Group 2. We have the single Dral. He's not in a Link team. I don't feel like he really even needs the Link team. The Link team's very expensive if you add other Drals in there, whereas this one guy with Stratus Cloud still makes his presence felt out in the midfield very effectively. Cavalry's very good for deployment zone defense, along with these flamethrowers. Baggage can be very good for taking zones with the extra points they add. We have a little mini. You guys might not like this, but I'm going to suggest it. This mini triad here with Alis Kisan, the Kael'thar, and the Tricore Tagma might seem like you're paying a bit too much for it. Might seem like it's lacking an HMG or a rocket launcher or something. But it can quite sneakily hang around for a turn or two, then move out late game, and your opponent's probably not looking at that expecting to come up against Alis Kisan at Ballistical 15 5 dice with a viral combi, which can be devastating. They may also forget about the fact she has a killer hacking device, nanopulsar, flash pulse, a bit of equipment there. That can be quite strong. So yeah, the Tricore, you pay a bit of points for them, but I kind of like the idea that these guys also have the 6th Sense level 2 as well. So cracking your team here, cracking the chain of command guy, landing stuff down next to the Toha line, Spiral Core line I should say, can get a bit dicey if these guys all have 6th Sense level 2 to help defend. I kind of like having that in there. I think you'll find it quite forgiving as a new player. Then in Group 2 we've got Clipsos, of course. You'll want to take something to go out and press the buttons, slay the mines, do the midfield shooting. Helots, just too good not to take really. So good with all the decoys and the neurocynetics. Then I've got the only MSV2 on the list. I kind of like that, especially since you've got access to smoke over there. So the Triad. The Tagma, of course, being the Lieutenant. If he gets counter-sniped and dies, Chain of Command Kael'thar will take over. We've even got enough points left over for this Diplomatic Delegate, who can use the Journalist ability to get that extra objective point in some scenarios. But also handy little flash pulse to to help defend, and not to mention the nanopulse to defend your deployment zone with. So not a bad starting point, a nice big robust spiral core, but as soon as you want to start breaking that down to 10 order lists, much smaller robust lists, less robust lists, less robusts. My point is, if you want to go for a limited insertion style, you know, compact list, that's when you probably start bringing in the Kielsans, the heavy duty guys. Alright, Foreign Company, I'm pleased to say that I've already practiced with this list twice. I've been studying it a lot recently. Foreign Company are not considered a very powerful sectorial. I'm making them my current hobby. I like them. This is a list where I've thought long and hard about how to do well with Foreign Company, and this is about as good as I can come up with so far. It may be worth dropping some of the things here, the Crocman, Multi-Sniper, and HMG, and putting in the Kreezer Borak instead, dropping Valkyrie, but I like that this is... I like that this sort of spreads out the capability a little bit. Valkyrie is an amazing data tracker. She's very good late game for moving out and hunting things midfield, lobbing grenades in clutch situations, and if you can get the smoke down from the Uberfell commandos somehow, she's extremely powerful at beating enemy close combatants. Not that the Chimera and Pupnik aren't. I mean, they're going to do that equally well. For long-range shooting, this list is a bit weak on the offense because it's just got the one HMG in the hands of the Securitate. He does go up to Ballistical 15 though. I love that the Securitates have Veteran for countering enemy jammers. In the aero game, I've actually got no fewer than 3 multi-snipers, one in the Link, 2 of them in Marcus State. The Crocman is there because your opponent's probably not expecting a multi-sniper. This list doesn't have a lot of ways of getting to grips with an opponent who's playing defensively, but the Crocman in your first turn may even be able to deploy out in the midfield, walk out as a marker, and start firing, you know, lanes, finding like angles towards their deployment zone, which are very close to them, that go cross map, which do very well. And in a pinch, you can just put down some mines, go back into Marcus State, very, very effective. You might also be on a table which has a lot of big, tall sniper towers out in the midfield, which it can take advantage of as well. The Zero multi-sniper can do something similar, but it can also be just as good to hang back towards the side of the table. Your opponent will think it's just a forward observer until it starts sniping, you know, halfway through the midfield. Assault Hacker, well, I've got to have at least one hacker in here. I'm not putting assisted fire on anything in this case. And again, assault hackers, I find them quite useful at shutting down or stopping or deterring some of the more popular ARO pieces out there. Bulletier, Ruishi, some of the tags, that kind of thing can be pretty clutch. Other than that though, we've just got some support here. The double Warcore, one sectorial that can actually do that. Dactaria with 2 Zonbots because she's wanting to cover the Securitates and the position of the snipers. Could be on either side of your deployment zone. So over a couple of games, I actually have a fair bit of hope that we might be able to get Foreign Company to work pretty well. As a new player, you're welcome to borrow this or a version of it. If you don't quite like what I've done with the guns, you can always drop some of the snipers and put the Kreezer in there. You might prefer that. And you know, keep watching my channel because you'll see a bit more playtesting of not just this list, but also the A-team with Hannibal and Laxmi and the group. Alright, last mercenary faction, and it is the most powerful mercenary faction. Part of me thinks that this is the strongest faction in infiNity at the moment. And looking at this list, I'm disgusted by how powerful and just points efficient this list is. McMurrah, one of the most broken profiles in the game. Zuyongs with tactical awareness, even though this isn't Invincible Army, they just have it anyway, so a couple of extra free orders in there. Aruishi, Spitfire in the Link team, not even Yu Qing can do that, which is kind of stupid to me. Like, what they should do is they should give this faction the Luduana Link team and give Invincible Army the Rushi, Spitfire in their Link team, then things would be a bit fairer. Not only that, but we have some super cheap bounty hunters which can sub in for them if you don't want the Rushin straight away or the HMG or Valeria staying at home, for example. Plenty of cheerleaders, all flash pulse bots, tractor mule in there. You've got the nice liaison officer Zensha, who's better at fighting midfield than the Hunzakut, but if you want even more points elsewhere, you can drop him down to be a Hunzakut. Ghulam Lieutenant, pretty obvious, but he's at least willpower 14 and nice and cheap. Warcork is why not, 112 to revive your HMG if it goes down, and a couple of the super undercosted Libertos who are like super Libertos because they have mimetism for like an extra 1 point, which is crazy to me. I've played this list at a tournament and did pretty well with it. I think I came second out of 30, 40 players, whatever it was. It's just sickening how powerful the sectorial is. So if you want to go straight for the Shark Company, you're probably going to gravitate to something that looks like this. So if you start purchasing some of these models, they will reward you for it. Finally, I've been talking for so long. We're nearly 2 hours into this video. Thanks for sticking with me if you've watched this whole thing, but I'm assuming most of you will probably just flick to the factions that interest you. Anyway, too late for that now. We're looking at O12, the most recently added sectorial faction to infiNity the game. I did play them a bunch of times. I've got some experience, and right off the bat, I'll say that we've got Cho, the new lieutenant option, in there from the Defiance Kickstarter. I think a lot of you will want to play the Alpha, because the Alpha gives you an additional order on top of that anyway with Strategos level 2 for the reserve shenanigans and counterintelligence, and he's quite a good fighter for only another, 9 points. Is it 9 points? No, we're adding another 11 points, my bad. Anyway, I've got Cho in there to save those 11 points. But also because the alpha model is actually pretty crappy. A lot of you guys will just avoid that because of that. But the first thing that I would change of this list as soon as you're ready to start tweaking it and changing things up would be to change for the alpha, because it's very popular and quite effective. Moving on from that though, one of the weaknesses I found from playtesting O12 is the ways of getting to grips with the enemy who are playing defensively, just trying to wait till their turn. The Delta's one way of doing that. You try and drop them into their line, hit them with a boarding shotgun. If you fail the drop, you've got a Panzerfaust from your deployment zone as it lands there. I've got plenty of Varangian guys to start running towards their line and creating havoc, although it's going to take them a while to get there. Then it's just a matter of throwing all the cheerleaders and defensive troopers. We've got 2 Upsilons, by the way. And if the Delta fails his run, the HMG Dakini's probably going to be it. You're going to put assisted fire on him with your very cheap Kappa Hacker and just charge out there and try and get the shots off. If you're defending though, pretty good defensive list. You've got the Mad Traps in there, you've got a couple of snipers, you've got plenty of chain colts and things like that. You'll probably be able to work your way through. Again, if you're starting O12 and you just want an example of a good O12 list, I think this will do it. But you might be inclined to trim the list down to say 15 orders, so you can afford a Gamma or a Omega Trooper, something like that with a bit more clout if you like that way of playing infiNity. But I've provided this for you because it's one of my better attempts at doing something which covers a lot of eventualities, and that's generally been the theme of this video. Thanks to whoever subscribed to me, even though this is a recorded video and not a live video. I just noticed that coming through on OBS. Whew, been talking for ages. Thanks, guys. Gosh, if you're a new player and this was useful to you, then that's fantastic. Don't forget to check out the page which has the army code in it if you want to use this as a template and then go and tweak these lists which I've created for you, maybe to conform a bit more closely to the models you have available. That might be a great place to start. But as always, hope this was helpful, and we'll see you in the next video.